Okay, John, thank you for coming on the show. If you just want to introduce yourself, tell everybody what you do and who you are, what you do. I think it's easier than me doing it, just in case I get a few bits wrong.
No problem, Chris. My name's John Willis. I'm head of recruitment at UK Football Scouting. Is my current position. I've been in scouting for a long time. I've been scouting for a long time. Spent 2 years at Norwich when they were in the Premier League, scouting for their academy. Spent 2 years at Ipswich, and now work more independent. So I scout independently and put players into clubs all over the UK, really, through using contacts I've got at different clubs. The idea of UK football scouting is basically we hold trial events over the UK, just in an attempt to give players the opportunity to be scouted. I come from background of football. I played youth football, went into pro clubs, was at a pro club, didn't get offered a pro contract at 18, come out of the pro game, went into non-league football, which I found really tough, real tough world, non-league football. Got promised trials at pro clubs and nothing ever come of it. I went on a couple of open trial things that were really, again, difficult, where you're competing with 100 players. Knew I weren't going to make it. Basically, you get to come to a point and thought this isn't going to happen. So started looking at what I was going to do, and I set up a company, Football Career Centre, which was geared to helping players that had been released from clubs, to try and help them, because it's difficult once you come out. You don't really know what to do. Set up Football Career Centre to help players to get back into the game and full time or high levels and non-league.
Yeah, you were saying there 1 in 100, and that was the people who were already good, who were already in an academy. What's the kind of percentage of lads who end up making it?
Well, when we spoke before, I looked, and they say less than 1% of the boys who are actually in an academy at 9 actually make it. So, and it's tiny, isn't it? They're the kids that are already in the system as well. So then obviously there's a battle for the positions to get into the academy as well. So I think I looked at the figures and it says 180 kids out of 1.5 million playing grassroots football would actually make it as a footballer. So the odds are against you, if you like.
What do you think the big difference maker between those who make it and those who don't is? Is it, like we were saying, is it nature versus nurture? Is it kind of, are they born with just God-given talent, or are they, do they have some help behind the scenes? Is it their mentality? I'm really obsessed at the moment with that the Michael Jordan documentary, The Last Stand, and just seeing that, like the ferociousness of him. And like there's memes going around where he'll say something like, oh, and he looked at me out of the corner of his eye, and then at that moment, it made it personal. Or it was like he sniffed, and at that moment it was personal. And like everybody's like taking the mick out of it a bit. But he was actually like that. Somebody would just say good game and tap him on the back, and he was like, next time I'm going to score 60 points. Is that the kind of ruthless mentality you need to have? Or because we see players like Phil Foden who seem really relaxed and like nice guys, but he still made it,
Yeah, I think there's a mix. I think you do get the natural ones, like, no one, no matter how much you train, you're not going to be Messi, Ronaldo. These guys I think they're naturally gifted people, the Maradonas, Paul Gascoigne. I think you do have to have a mentality like what you were talking about. I think you do have to be resilient. It's not easy in a football change room. Especially if you're coming into a change room, you're a new player, and you're going in, you're about to break up a team, and the first question you get asked, I've been on trials before where you go into a club, first question they ask all the time is, what position do you play? Because they want to identify whose position you're after. And then if it's one of their mates, they can make that day really difficult for you. And that's where you do have to be mentally strong to say, I'm not having this, or do you just say, this is difficult and don't perform?
I agree with that, yeah. It's one of my big problems with football is that it's an 11-player sport which means that, let's say I used to be out on the wing, so if people saw that you were having a good game, or if there was a scout there, the ball's not coming your way for the rest of the game. You know, you could be wide open and they turn inside and pass it elsewhere or take a shot. And I always regretted not going into something like boxing, where I had a little bit of natural talent in it. My dad always taught me, but I knew that if I knock someone out, I win. Like if somebody hates you, it doesn't matter. You win, you rise up. But in a team sport, you know, you're kind of governed by, like in boxing, the coach can't take you off. They can throw in the towel, but they can't take you off and sub you for someone else, or you're not starting today. You know, it's one-on-one. So I was always, you know, devastated that I didn't do that, because you go into a team sport and, like I said, people can either knock past you, the coach might just play their son instead of you, and I always thought that was something I should have looked into.
I think it's a mix, isn't it? Because at the same time, the team can lift you if you're having a real tough time as an individual. You're on your own. Where, you know, I've had plenty of bad games where your team get you out of trouble, and someone would get hold of you and say, "Come on, John," you know, and it'll just make you realise, and you think, right, and then your team can carry you a little bit and help you out, and you don't have that with individual sport, do you? So I agree with what you're saying. I think individual sport is easier. I think it probably is easier if you're very good.
Yeah, that makes sense.
If you're elite, then if you're one of the best as an individual, then it probably is easier. I say easier, it's still not easy, obviously, but maybe that part, I think. But the team, I like a team environment, I think. You know, I like that part of it. I think if you can get a good team with a good mentality and a good bond, then you're very hard to beat. I think that's what you need as a team, not necessarily 11 best players, but if you can get a dressing room that's tight and, you know, really know everyone really well, that can be really difficult to replicate with anything else.
Yeah, because you think you've got like somebody, for example, a Gary Neville, who would never be in anybody's world 11, but if you were building a team, you'd probably consider him, wouldn't you? You'd probably put him in.
Yeah, you'd take him.
Premier League team.
Yeah.
On the basis of scouting, modern scouting, what's the kind of setup now? Is it completely different to how it used to be? Are you looking for separate talents? I mean, I've read all of the Barcelona and Pep Guardiola books, and the way that they say that a kid might be skinny and small, but, you know, and he might not be the best player on the field, but he has the best technical ability. And they think, okay, if we wait 2, 3, 4 years, he's going to, you know, they sign based on potential and future growth. Is that something we're doing in the UK now?
I think a lot of it depends on the club. Clubs are different. I would say we're not as, don't look to the future as much as maybe other nations do. I think the thing you have with scouting is the easiest ones to pick out are the ones that stand out. So, and they might be the biggest, strongest boys, might be the quickest one. The problem we have is the little technical one, who might be younger than everyone else. I know when we spoke before, we had a brief chat about late birthdays. There could be someone on the field who's a year, maybe sometimes more than a year younger than everyone else. So they won't stand out. So them ones don't get picked up all the time. So clubs have noticed that has been recognised, and we had a thing at Norwich called the Futures Programme, which was purely just a group of late birthdays. So they all got to train together. And, you know, in a year's a long time when you're developing. And certain players might not have grown yet. So, and when they do, technically, they're more advanced than the ones that were bigger at the time. So there is a massive thing for, you know, I think that's something I try to do, is look at where will he be in sort of 2-3 years' time? Then you get the thing of watching a player and maybe thinking he's playing wide, but he's never going to be a winger. Obviously, it's, in my opinion, not set in stone, but I might think he'd be a really good fullback. And then I would look at maybe that. And I think when you first start scouting, the same as me, I would never have thought that. I would have just gone and said, he hasn't got past his fullback at all. He hasn't put any crosses in, and put a cross by his name. When now I've been scouting for a long time and seen a lot of players. Now I might be thinking, do you know what, I'd like to see him at fullback and then maybe look at that option rather than seeing him as a winger and just crossing his name off.
Yeah. A friend of mine's son is currently, I'm just thinking about when you said the size difference. A friend of mine's son is currently at, well, I won't name the team because it's probably not fair, but he's also being looked at by a top Premier League team. One of the, the old Big Four, if you could. And it's a team that used to be known, people will figure it out, but as long as we don't say it, it's safe, isn't it? But they used to be known for their football, they're very Barca-like in their style. And he's being looked at by them. The problem is, they said he's got all the ability in the world, he's skillful, he's exactly what they were looking for 10, 15 years ago. Whereas now they said they're looking for bigger lads. Like they want players who are minimum 5'10". And he's got an Indian father, so he's Indian himself and an Indian mother. And I've seen that there's a big problem with people from kind of Asian backgrounds in terms of size and getting scouted. I think Copper 90 did a documentary on it where they said that they've had to create their own league because they're just not being looked at. Number one, what's going on there with the kind of Asian footballers? Is it something that scouts still look at, or is it a problem? And what about the size thing in terms of like those top teams? Is that something we're going to see in the future? The old motto of a good big un is better than a small good un. A lot of people said that.
Yeah, I think it will depend. Every club has their own DNA of an academy player that they sort of be called the academy DNA, and that's what you would scout by. So that might be, we're looking for small technical players that are good on the ball, intelligent. Another club might be looking for just athletes, physically strong, quick, powerful. I've always been of a mind where I think you need a mix, and maybe that's sometimes. I find the problem when you have a DNA of a certain player, then you have 11 of them. And going back to what we said, they're not going to make a good team. Having 11 Messis isn't going to be a good football team because you're not going to be very good at defending. And that's the only problem, because there'll be some players, like where you mentioned Gary Neville, you might not put him in your world 11, but you'd have him as your fullback if you're building a team. So I think it's good to have a mix. I think there's some fantastic small players around. I don't think it's a case that they're not being picked up and they're not being scouted. It's just the problem you have is you scout them, you put them in the academy, whether they come out the other end and the first team manager thinks they're good enough to play for the first team is then not your decision as a scout. So, we put them in, and then it's down to a lot of other people once our job's over then. We put them into the club, and then it's down to the player for one, and then the coaches to believe in that player, then the under-21s manager to believe in that player, then the first team manager to believe in that player. So it's a long road after.
Is that the kind of motto of the teams now, though? So, like, let's say they've got 11 players, or 10 players, because obviously the keeper, but 10 players that are similar in terms of like that build, that criteria that we mentioned. And they lose maybe more games than they should, but then one or two make it through the conveyor belt and make it into the first team. Is that kind of the mentality?
That's the main goal, isn't it? To produce players that go on and play professional football for the football club. So I think they're always looking at sort of one or two from each age group that they think they've got a chance. That one's got a chance, and then they'll do what they can to push them players through. The problem is for every one that makes it, like we said, out of a group of one age group, you might have a 16, 20 player squad, and only one of them is going on, each time. There's a lot of boys left without a football club.
Yeah, it's a shame. What's it like in other countries? I don't know if you've been around and had a look. I imagine you've travelled a bit.
Yeah, I've been to. Holland's very good. I went to Holland and did some work in Holland, and they were very based around small-sided games. Everything they did was games, so it was little 4v4s. I think the FA sort of started to get on board with that concept, but they'd been doing it a long time before us. So, for example, even I was running my independent academy, and I was doing that before the English FA had brought it in as a thing that we did here. So I was doing a lot of little 4v4 games, and you can do so much in a small-sided game, but at the same time, there's room for much other types of coaching as well. I think you need it's all about a good mix and balance, isn't it? Because if a player's only ever played small-sided games, they're going to struggle in other areas of the game. But I had a player that I see last season, and he was Spanish, and he was 16 years old, and he just come to an open trial, and he was very good. He was a good size. He was good on the ball, technically really good. And I sort of spoke to him and said, "Who have you played for?" "Oh, nobody." And thought, wow, he's not played. It weren't until I spoke to him after and spoke to him and his dad that he had been at an academy in Spain. He just didn't say that. It might have been Valencia. I can't remember the club who he was at, but I had a chat with him, and the problem he had in his game, he never put a cross in, or he never had a shot. He never had any real final product. He was very good between the halfway line and the opposition box. And I had a chat, and I said, this is where you need to improve if you're going to go on and play academy football. And he said, the reason I did that, I never played with any goals. So through
really?
his, I was, it was fascinating to hear someone say, he said, I'm not used to playing with goals. So
he was just trying to keep the ball.
Yeah, just keep ball sessions all the time. Everything, keep one small-sided. So, and technically he was excellent. He's actually gone and signed a 2-year contract at a conference club, and he's within their academy now in England. So, we recommended him in there, and he went down there and they signed him, and he's doing all right. Then, hopefully he'll move on and go and play at a league club. It'll just be him adapting now to our style of football. Because he's going to have to use a goal now. Yeah. And his final product was he's scoring a lot of goals for them. So he's obviously, if you've got the other bits, he just needed that one side of his game just to come on, and you knew he was going to have a chance. And he's obviously doing that now.
Is there what's the kind of link between international success, or should I say, in England, international failure that we've had? Would you put that down to the players? Have we got a small pool of players? Is it the scouting? Is it the coaching? Or I've kind of got a theory that it's similar to America, where they've got a big competition of sports, but their population is so big they can account for it. I think our competition in the UK is that we have clubs. We have a lot going on. We have, like Xbox, PlayStation games now. We have Netflix, television, like all these components. And there's just so much competition, and people do have access to good jobs, qualifications, etc. I just think we've got less people trying to vie for those positions than maybe, let's say, with respect, a country that has a lower income, and that's kind of the only way out. What would you kind of put it down to?
I think the amount of people, when we looked at the figures earlier and you say there's 1.5 million kids playing grassroots football, I think that's a lot. And
it's still a good number, yeah.
If we have even more, then there's even less people making it. There's only the same amount will be able to go into, there's only so much room at professional academies to take. It's a hard one, isn't it? It'll become an opinion thing, won't it? I think at times, I think we've maybe tried to play a way that's different to what the English game is known. Like when we grew up, it was 4-4-2. You played a big number 9 and a little number 10, and you hit the 9 as early as you could, and he flicked it on, and the 10 running behind. We went to tournaments and started and playing 3 at the back, and then we'd go and play the new 4-2-3-1 type formation. And I wonder, would we have done better in some of them competitions if we just played an Andy Carroll up front and said, go and be a handful, or crouch. Yeah. And it's opinions. Listen, I want to play football. I want to see good football, and but there is sometimes I think we pass it without no purpose, and that's across all levels of football. I think we're obsessed with this tiki-taka from Barcelona, which in when I look at it and I talk about, I think they've fooled us a little bit, because when you look at the players they've got, you can't replicate that with players who aren't technically as good as them. So I think you need to play for your strength. I'm currently working in the Ryman Premier League, again with Kem, who I've done a lot of work with, and our budget isn't as great as others, so we need players that work hard. We're not going to be able to go and say, well, I'll tell you what, let's go and play like Barcelona do, because we're not going to have the players that can do that. We're not going to play out from the back, because then we're going to make a lot of mistakes and we're going to concede a lot of goals. So we're going to build our team around hard work, discipline, good shape. And I think I think maybe we haven't done that with the England side. I think if you look back at the big competitions, we've always played players where they don't play for their clubs. We've taken players who haven't played a single league game. Yeah, Scholes playing on the left. When the whole Lampard, Scholes and Gerrard thing was just almost comedy, wasn't it? Where you had to play all three of them, so one of them had to play out of position, rather than just saying who's the best player in that role, and we play, and one has to get left out. And I think every competition we've done that with. You'll find we'll go to a competition and we've got a player starting who hasn't played one game for his club.
Yeah, Theo Walcott was like that, wasn't he?
Mm-hmm. Well, we took him at 17 years old and he didn't play, did he? And it's like, I don't see why. I'm all for taking a 17-year-old, because Michael Owen did it and he scored that goal against Argentina, didn't he, at that age? So it's possible to do it, but if you're going to take him, then play him.
Yeah, that makes sense. I know we spoke about the numbers game in terms of making it as a holistic approach. So let's say 1 million or so lads trying to make it and whatnot. Is there anything that people can do or players can do in terms of the numbers game when it comes to a positional sense, or like we spoke about the other day, or anything that they can do to stand out? Let's say just be the hardest worker, or just find something unique. I read a book a few years ago called The One Thing by Gary Keller. He's like a billionaire from real estate now, and everyone thinks that he got there by selling the most homes. He actually got there from getting the most homes listed, and he forgot about selling the homes. He was like, I'll just get them listed and somebody else will sell them. And that kind of created a niche for him, and he became super successful. And you see plenty of players that they just do one thing very well, and they've carved out a career in multiple sports. I mean, you've got Dennis Rodman, who couldn't score a basket in basketball at all, but he was the best defensive player. Would you recommend anything like that so that so players in the UK can kind of increase their percentage of making it? Is there maybe a certain position that gets played less, or a certain skill that most people don't have anymore that's not seen as fashionable?
I would say that when I'm in my experience of when I run trial events or I'm at trials, there's much more attacking players. So, you've got the wide players, the forwards, and the attacking midfielders would be the higher percentage of where players say they play. So, if you're a good fullback, our club's getting letters every day from fullbacks asking for trials. Probably not. They're probably all forwards and attacking players. I think players my advice to players is always to look at their attributes, and it's all right to know what you're not good at. So I wasn't quick, so I didn't run past anybody. Whereas I see players who, I spoke to a striker not long ago, and all he did was try to run in behind all the time, but he wasn't quick. So, and I asked him, why do you keep running in behind? And he said, and you could tell he just thought that's what you had to do as a forward, is I need to run in behind. So I said, the centre half is obviously much quicker than you, so why don't you come short and get it to feet? And then you may be able to lay it off, then spinning behind and give yourself a little bit of head start. And he just looked confused at me as if, oh, right. And, he'd obviously never been told that before. And he literally got himself in a foot race every time, and he lost every time. But still, next time he thought, I'll have another go. And, I think sometimes knowing what you're not good at can be a strength, because then you don't do it. And, you get players who just will get around the football pitch and, they just give you everything, and you need one of them in your team all the time, one or two of them. And they might not be the greatest footballers in the world, but what they do is they make that team. a James Milner type, if you like. He causes a lot of debate, I'd say, whether people like him, people don't as a footballer, but he gets in every side. No matter who Liverpool was signing, he's still there playing. He gets in the England team, so he must be doing something right. When you speak to people and they say he's not very good, so
yeah.
He's doing all right. And he's not my favourite footballer. If he said he was my favourite footballer, he wouldn't be in the list. But what he does do is, obviously, for a manager, when you get to work with players, I think that's when you learn about them. So we see them on the telly, or we see them when we go to games, and you don't really get it. But when you get to know a player and they've played for you, you get a trust in certain players. You know they're going to go and do the exact thing you ask of them. We don't get to see that bit in the Premier League, where we see the fullbacks maybe playing really high and we're shouting at the telly, why is he not coming back? The manager's no good because he's not telling him. He might be telling him that he needs to be back there, and he's just not doing it, because he might be that type of player where he doesn't remember, and when he's in the game he just wants to get forward, and then he's forgetting the tactical side of it, that the manager's asked him to keep a tight shape or tuck in, and he's not doing it. We then blame the manager and say he doesn't know what he's doing. But some players don't always do what you want them to do exactly when you want them to do it. Whereas some do, and that throughout 90 minutes they'll never be out of position, they'll never let you down. So
I was just going to say, do you think that's why players like Henderson, Milner, that kind of get slated, by the average person? I personally don't think they're that great. But when you look at the statistics and you start digging deeper, you're like, wow, yeah, and they do exactly what the manager asks of them. So do you think that's why they're...
Exactly. They're both, and when you look at those two, they're both really fit, aren't they?
Yeah.
You don't need to take them off. They're going to give you 90 minutes of that high quality all the time. So, but then when you then flip that, you need your players up to, you need your salary, maybe not working as hard as them, but all in your football match. And I think it always goes back to what we said earlier, where you've got to have that team and that mix, and you've got to have your hard work in, your engine, and then you've got to have the flair to go and win football matches, because they're the ones that get all the money and they're the ones that get all the plaudits, because they're scoring the goals and setting up the goals. But without them two behind, they'll be, when you're at a football club or you're in that environment, they'll be the quickest people to tell you how good they are. They're the ones that their opinions what matters, because they'll say, if you say who's the best player in the team, you'll tend to find they won't choose the flair player. They'll say it's the Milner or the Henderson, because they can see how much running they're doing.
Yeah, that's what my dad always used to say. Player is the best award to get, because you're recognised by your peers, and they know obviously the game. They know more. So, do you think there's any players that were superstars for other countries that have gone on to have like great careers that wouldn't have made it in the UK because maybe of the birth date thing that we spoke about the other day, or maybe because of their skill set? Like, would a Bergkamp have made it in the UK for his lack of pace, or somebody similar like that?
I always, with Bergkamp, I liken him to Sheringham a little bit. So, and Sheringham wasn't quick at all. Yeah. Fantastic player. He done really well. He's a great player, Teddy Sheringham. And I think I don't think there's Kevin De Bruyne is a good one. I'm sure he was a late birthday. We got a list of players that were late birthday through that Future program I said about, and I know Messi's on there. I think Iniesta might be on there as well.
I think Iniesta is,
he's a late birthday. There's a lot of them, and Kevin De Bruyne was one. And obviously De Bruyne was here with Chelsea before, and some people don't remember that, because especially the younger sort of supporters. But he was at Chelsea and he didn't break in and do what he's done now. He had to go abroad, and he went abroad and he played, and then he's come back. And so maybe you could class De Bruyne as not making it here. I don't know if you could class it. He has now, but he didn't. And would Messi come through our academy system and play in the Premier League? That's a question on its own, isn't it? It's, I personally would say he'd find it difficult to get through.
I agree.
Because, the problem we have is people look at Messi now and say, would he play in Premier League? Of course he would, because he's that good. But would he be that good if he didn't come through at Barcelona, or come through the route he took. If he was an 8-year-old, 9-year-old here, would he have got signed? Would he have got scouted? It's unknown. We don't know.
Well, I heard a story from Rooney. He was talking about Piqué and Vidic. He said when Vidic was playing up against, I think they had Chelsea the following week, he knew he was playing against Drogba. He said he'd be in the gym like 3 days before, just hitting the weights relentlessly, heavy weights, compound lifts, just trying to get himself like prepared for that muscular battle against Drogba. They said whereas somebody like Piqué just got smashed to pieces. They said they played somebody away. I can't remember who it was. It was a lower team, but he got smashed around by the bigger lads, and that was kind of the end of his career. And then he headed back to Barca and flourished under that style. And I always think of Cannavaro, a 5'9" centre back. Like, he probably never would have made it in the UK because he would have lost so many headers.
And I think that's the difference in the game, isn't it, and the style of football. So it's not necessarily our academy system that's the problem. It's the style of football is different. So you don't. There's Diego Costa in Spain, who was the big, that type of striker, and he caused them all sorts of problems there. He's hard to deal with for the centre halves. They're not used to that. They're used to the little technical players that you just press them and then they'll give the ball and then you get back into your shape, rather than that physical non-stop battle. Like someone like Drogba, you just don't want to play against him, do you?
No.
As a centre half, you just you're going to know you had a game that day.
Do you think in the UK we should be more proud of our style, kind of, especially when we go to tournaments? I know you said earlier we should play to our strengths, but do you think we should be like, we are British, here's our identity? But yeah, it's not the cleanest looking style, but it's effective. Because I've always had this debate.
I think.
Sorry, I was just going to say, I've always had the debate that the best player ever is Ronaldinho, but the most effective is Messi, Ronaldo, Maradona, etc. Because they win trophies, they score goals. But in terms of talent, is Ronaldinho. But if you were building a team, you'd build it around Ronaldo. And I think it's the same with kind of the British style. It's like, yeah, it might not be easy on the eye, but Peter Crouch did score an incredible amount of goals.
Well, yeah, I'm a Spurs fan, and when Van der Vaart was at Spurs and he played with Crouch, he scored more goals than I think he scored any season.
Yeah.
And that was purely because Crouch just takes up defenders. He occupies defenders because he's that tall and people are wary of him as a presence. I think we do. We should have played. I think it doesn't matter what your strength is. I think you should just play to it. So if your strength is getting it forward, I know that we just said about Piqué. He struggled because of that physical side of the defending. So when we play Spain, why don't we go and play like that? Instead of playing one up top and lively players around trying to run in behind, which they are used to dealing with, why don't we just go and play with two big men and say, just go and make it really difficult? And, they ask questions of them. I think it's really easy in football to worry about the opposition. So, when we will look at a team on a Friday night, when we've got a game on Saturday, and you can get caught up in going, oh no, they've got him. Should we change our formation, or should we play him at the back? Because to deal with him, rather than saying, let's just play our way and let's go and ask questions of them, because at the end of the day, it's 11 men and 11 men, isn't it?
Yeah.
When you get to that level, it is all about mistakes. They're all good players. They're all, if you're playing a World Cup, everyone there is a good player. And it's about who's going to make a mistake. A lot of the time, football's so technical now. And when you look at the Premier League, you watch all the big games, you think this is going to be amazing. Man City versus Liverpool, 1-0.
Yeah.
Yes, 0-0. Because they're tactically set up so well that, and they don't make mistakes. They don't make as many mistakes as players used to, or lower down the divisions, there are obviously more mistakes as you go down. And so it's all it's the mental side of the game, is the physical, athletic of the players, and the mental side is just so high.
Yeah. Well, one thing that I've been looking at recently, and in recent years, every team plays with one striker. It's very rare you see a team with two strikers, which I actually think is a mistake. I think if you've got a ton of possession, you should probably go something like a 3-5-2 and just get the crosses in.
I think it's hard with a three. I think the three at the back and then dividers, isn't it? It's like, so it's a love or hate formation with a three at the back. But I think, 4-4-2, and we even down in the Ryman Premier League where I've been working, they're playing one up front in there. So even down to the non-league levels, playing the 4-2-3-1 like everyone else is. It is just the go-to formation, it seems now, that everyone plays. But we did go to two up front a lot of times last year, because you get people and it's easy to deal with one. You've got two centre-halves and one player to deal with, whereas when you start asking them to go and mark someone each, and you haven't got that spare one to deal with any mistakes that the first defender makes, then it becomes difficult for them. But that gamble is you leave yourself empty in midfield. If the other team's got three in midfield and you've got two, your two have got to be very good, and they're going to have to work very hard.
If you were a young striker now then, and knowing that most teams only play with one up front, what would you do? Because that's probably the toughest numbers game. Well, maybe apart from goalkeepers. But
it's hard, because if you can't get hold of it, it's going to be difficult for you to play up as a one. If you're that sort of, like, you think players like Michael Owen, he wouldn't be able to play in that current formation up on his own. Or he could play it, but you wouldn't get the best out of him from it. When they were, I think they must have been, they playing with Heskey there, weren't they, at that sort of time? So someone who did you called it the dirty work, if you like, you go and be physical and get in people's faces and make it difficult, and then the little ones profit on the mistakes and the knockdowns, and that's where the percentage football comes in. As if you stick it onto a big man non-stop all game, you're going to get a chance where a ball drops down or a ball goes in behind and someone's going to get on the end of it. And I think with the one up front, it's much more difficult. You find a lot of strikers get isolated so much in the current formation. Well, and it's hard for the teams who are not as good. When you see them play the big sides, they play so deep, and then they kick it long to their forward. He gets hold of it, and he's waiting, and then he gets dispossessed. It's just because he's got no one backing him up.
Yeah, I was looking the other day, the average striker gets something like, I think it was just slightly less than 40 touches per game. I think it was like 37, 38. You think, God, in a 90-minute game, there's not a lot of time to impact a game.
I think the thing is, out of 90 minutes, you're only on the ball for like 2 minutes, aren't you?
Yeah.
A player.
Collectively,
a player is only on the ball. Yeah, the rest of the time you're talking, running, getting into shape, doing the hard parts. And that's what I try and get across to players now when we do events and I get the players in, and we try and talk to them about that, because everyone I see is okay on the ball, they're good on the ball. They don't understand the game. They don't understand there's two sides to football, that there's with and without the ball. A lot of players use that time without the ball to rest. So rather than work hard to get the ball back, they use it as rest time. So that part we try and get across, and you think they can do all these tricks with the ball. The skill levels of players nowadays compared to when we were young is huge different. They can all do these skills and these around the world and tricks and things, but you're only touching the ball for 2 minutes.
Yeah.
So for 88 minutes, or 90 minutes probably with the time added on, you've got to be doing the other bits that you don't like doing.
That's really eye-opening. That's massively eye-opening. I wish I'd been told that at like 10 years old. Because it just shows you that like all the work's being done with the ball, and you think to yourself, well, actually, there's a lot of positional work going into that. There's a lot of stamina work, the sprint work, etc. The awareness around yourself. We should be training so much more in different areas.
I think the problem as well is you're doing all that part, and then you're tired, and then you get that opportunity to do the bit you're good at, and you don't do it because you're tired.
Yeah. And
then you're not capable of doing the bit that you've actually been waiting for. So, that's why players have to be so fit. Yeah, and I think that's another thing, is the fitness and the work ethic is, it's massively important. And that's what, I always get asked, what would I advise players? That's it, is get yourself fit. No one can help that bit. That's down to you how fit you get.
Yeah.
We can train every day, of course we can, and you get fitter, but your natural fitness as a person, just doing extra things for yourself to keep yourself fit, eating correctly, looking after yourself, is down to the individual. And I think I'd never go on to a football trial and not be fit. Whereas it does happen. I see a lot of it, and I have to say to them, I could never put you into a club, or technically I could, but I couldn't send a player in who can't last 40 minutes.
Yeah.
They're tired after one half of football. So, get yourself fit, be prepared to work hard, and I think realise it's difficult. It's difficult.
That's what I was going to ask you. If you were a young lad trying to make it now, what kind of what's the perfect criteria to make it in the modern game? And it's a two-parter too, because what are like one or two more esoteric traits, like rarer traits that you would say, do these one or two things, barely anybody's doing them, but people don't realize how important they are?
I think my thing would be there's going to be a few football club, and they get 100 applications for trials. They're all going to be good footballers. You've got to stand out over all of them, whether that's through your CV, your video footage, if they're sending videos in. I think the hard work part and the being fit, I've learned that over time. I probably wouldn't have thought like that. I would have just thought, if you're the best player technically, you'll be all right. But I don't think is the case. If you're the best player technically, you're not prepared to work hard and you're not prepared to listen. That's what I'd say to you, listen and just accept that you don't know everything. And, take advice on, I've done it as a player, as a coach, as a scout, is I listen to everyone. So during this, where I'm speaking to you, I'll learn something and I'll take that away and I might then use it somewhere else. And I think so many players are very quick to not listen to people, maybe have been in their shoes and done it and failed or been successful at it. I think it's hard to say if there's something unique. I don't think there is anything unique you can do as such. I think you can find yourself, your position, and be truthful to yourself. So, I know everyone wants to be the tricky winger or the forward who scores the goals, but we're not all good at that. And to do that, you've got to be the best at it. You've got to be better than the other 100 boys who are trying to become a striker. If you're a good fullback, you're technically good, you work hard, you understand the game. Are there loads of them about? Probably not. I think it's less competitive probably in the trial situation with the fullbacks and the centre backs. It's very rare that I get a real good centre half come to an open trial. Whether that's because they've already been picked up and they're playing, or just because we don't produce them big animal centre halves anymore, do we? Because they're all footballing centre backs now. So you tend to find at academies that the centre backs are the ones who didn't quite cut in centre midfield.
Who drop back, yeah.
And they move backwards. And the same with the fullbacks. There'll be the wingers that didn't. Ashley Cole was a forward. Sol Campbell was a forward.
Sol Campbell, wow.
I think Ledley King was.
Ferdinand?
Well, Sol Campbell actually played for Tottenham as a forward.
Oh, wow.
Not remember, he played in a couple of games when he was young as a forward, and then moved to centre half. Ledley King was a centre midfielder. I think Paul Konchesky was a wide player. None of these players played at the back in their youth football.
There's an interesting story about Ledley King. I think he was on Soccer AM years ago. They asked a couple of his mates who had made it in another industry. I think it might have been music. And they said, you went to school with him. Was he just miles better than everybody else? They said, not at all. He wasn't even the best player. He just worked the hardest. And when there was a party, he stayed at home and trained the next morning. Yeah, there you go. And that goes back to that's the unique thing, is that desire. I'd say I've been looking at a few podcasts and things, and I talked to a lot of players who did make it and things. And their difference, I would say the difference with them and me, as well as they're obviously better than me. When I look back at the time, I thought I was as good as everyone else. But when you look back and you go, do you know what, he's obviously a better player than me. But what they did have that I didn't, they had a better mentality than me. So when I spoke to players who played professional football, they got knockbacks as well. So they got released at the same age I did. But then what they did was they got their head down and said, right, I'm going to prove everyone wrong and I'm going to come make it. And I probably didn't do that. I was probably mentally not as strong as them. And I think that is so important. And you realise that as you get older and you've been involved in the game longer, how important the mental side is. You can't just be very good. Yeah.
On a Saturday, you got to. There's a lot more to it. You've got to train all week. You've got to train hard. You've got to put your body on the line every day. You've got to put yourself through pain every day. And then you've got to perform at a level every week as well.
Do you think having too many, sometimes being blessed too much is not a benefit? Like in terms of entrepreneurial success, you find a lot of rich kids never do that well. They usually actually go the other way because things were too easy. And I remember growing up, like I used to do 100-meter sprinting. I was always like sub 11 seconds in terms of sprinting. Always got on the pitch without a warm up. You could run down the wing, take on 3 or 4, whip a cross in. And as I went through the ages, I found that the centre back would read what you were going to do, and you do that long kick down the line and chase, and the centre back would just come over, pick it up, and intercept. And I saw that the older you get or the higher level you start to play, the less things like pace, ability on the ball, the less they're effective. It's more about the mental side of the game. Would you say that's true?
I think it is right. It's because everyone, when you're a kid and you're quicker than the others. Because the gap is big.
Yeah.
So the higher you go, it closes. So there will be quick strikers in the Premier League. There's really quick players, and they cause certain centre halves a lot of problems because they're not as quick as them. But generally, everyone's quick. Like when you hear people say, "Oh, he's slow," he's not slow.
Yeah.
He's just not rapid, where like the striker is. But they're all quick, and it all becomes about. It's a chess match, isn't it?
Yeah.
So how am I going to get in behind him with a head start? Or how am I going to find a little bit of space with my clever movement? Because if you just stand still, there's not going to be a player playing at the highest level that if you stand still, you're going to beat when you receive the ball. Because they're going to deal with that. It's being clever. You've got, when you look at someone like Messi, is this clever? He's amazing, isn't he? Once he drops in a pocket and gets turned, you're in trouble. But he always plays forward. And that's the thing where I said about the Barcelona thing earlier. They always play forward.
Yeah.
They're only moving it to the sides and make a hole so they can go forwards. And I think that's where we get caught up in the tiki-taka a little bit and we start playing around the back. And is there a purpose? You've got to have a reason. You're changing the picture. Every time you switch the play, you change the picture in front of you. And that's why you do it, is you move the ball so you change the picture in front of you. There's nothing on in front of me. I'm going to move it to the side and hopefully their picture will change. They'll be able to find the person in front of them. But when you then just keep going back and forth and the player's head isn't even looking for the forward option, and then that's when it becomes a non-effective way of playing.
Yeah, it's one thing I hate about defensive midfield is I feel like it's a vanity. It's a great position, but it has vanity metrics around it. So you'll see a big signing in the Premier League, like Man City, who iSports signed Rodri, who I actually think is a great player for different reasons as to what they listed. But you'll see it on Sky Sports and they'll say interceptions 50. They'll say things like headers won 80 last season. They say pass success 98%. And you think, well, all three of them are a logical fallacy because he's 6'2", he's in defensive mid, he's going up against centre attacking midfielders and strikers, he's going to win the headers because most of them are small. The pass success is like, well, he's got time on the ball, he's making a lot of, just sideways passes to teammates that are wide open. And then interceptions, you think, well, he's in the perfect position to do that. So it's not necessarily, there's a lot of vanity metrics in that position. It kind of annoys me somewhat.
I think it's changed, hasn't it? Because you've got the cams now and you've got the CDM. And I get people come to the trial day, go into clubs and you say, what position? And they actually say, I'm CDM. And they say I'm a cam. A lot of cams around now. And false nines even I've had. I'm a false nine. And it's like, it's crazy. And that's, and as you mentioned earlier about the computer games, that's come from that.
Yeah.
Because there's no... we don't set up and say you're cam or we set up in a formation and midfielders have to defend and attack.
Yeah.
Strikers have to drop in and stop people getting on the ball. You can't. The cam's a bit of a sort of one with me. I find it. I think it's created a lot of players that don't want to defend. So they say I'm a cam because it's the old free roll, isn't it? You're in a free roll. That means I don't have to do any defending. I just wait here and make sure I'm in a hole to receive the ball when someone else gets it back for me.
Well, what people forget about the cam and the false nine is those positions were created when somebody was so good that they needed to create a team around them or a position for them. So
Exactly.
false nine was Messi was so good that they said, okay, let's build the team around this singular position. You know, or you see somebody like a Lampard and you think, okay, let's create a cam position because he seems to be getting a lot of goals from that position.
The thing is, Lampard could play in a two though, couldn't he?
Yeah,
You know,
he's brilliant.
at Chelsea he played in a two, and he was box to box. And he's very good at getting in the box late, weren't he? And I think they then created the three with him in it because it meant he could be more effective with getting forward. And I think that's the difference. Is rather than playing someone there just because they want to play with a cam, if the manager says to himself, how can we get Lampard in the box more if we play two midfielders behind him? That would, just let him loose a little bit more. Then that's good managing and good coaching. I think when we say, I want to play this formation, and then, right, what players have I got to put in it? That's when you have a bit of a problem. I'd always look at my team first and say, if I've got three centre-halves and no full-backs, then I'm going to play three at the back because that's all I've got there to use to play. So I think you need to look at your team and then pick your format. I think a lot of people want to play a certain way, and we'll all have our way we want to play, and then they try to fit their team into the way they want to play. And I think sometimes it needs to be done the other way, and you need to play to what you've got.
Well, that's something that Guardiola does, doesn't he? He signs players who can play multiple positions. Do you think that helps in terms of being scouted? Somebody who, I mean, it's hard to see on one day, but...
You know what? It's a real tough one, this one, because at the same time that you can become quite valuable, I think as you go down the leagues, it's great because I'll speak to our manager and we'll say he can play three positions and we only have to pay one wage out because we've got a budget that means it has to be spread around and you have to be smart with it. So having a fullback that can also play at centre half, or a fullback that can play in centre midfield and left back, it's going to help us because we only have to sign one player, and you've covered three positions. I think at the highest level they don't have to worry about things like that because they'll have enough players and they'll want the top players in that position. They wouldn't want someone who can just do a job there. I think the danger with it for players is you never establish yourself in a team. I think that's the negative. And I'd almost use Milner again in that he's played everywhere. And he's never really been, right, he's starting there every week.
Yeah.
We never know where he's going to play because he would do a job and get a 7 out of 10 everywhere. Even at centre half, he would go in there and do a job. But because of that, he's never established himself as England's best number 4 or England's best number 8. So I think being adaptable is key, and understanding all positions is key, so that you can do a job there and be prepared to do it at your best. But I think to just say I can play anywhere probably wouldn't do you massive. It wouldn't. I don't think that would give you any edge over anyone else.
Yeah. Are there any kind of red flags? Like, what are the things that if you see something and you're like, that's a big no, like you're never going to make it, or is it? What does that base around?
I think if anything, it's attitude. I think that's probably my biggest bugbear. Is like someone will come and take part in a game and I'm there and I try and give them a bit of advice and they almost like tell you you're wrong and sort of no, this is how and I think attitude is like, it's again over time I've sort of learned that you get players with excellent attitudes and they'll do well wherever they go because people will like them. Coaches will want to work with them because they want to be coached. And that side of it, the attitude side, and not thinking that beating 3 players and then turning back again and beating them again is going to get you noticed, because I think decision making is something massive that I look for, because if someone makes the right decisions, and they might be getting it wrong, so they might try and switch a ball, but they're only sort of 9, 10 years old, so they haven't got the power to do it, but they it's the right pass.
Is that something can you teach that? Can you teach like a
Van
Persie?
That boy is I think that boy is going to get bigger, isn't he? and he's going to be able to hit that pass. So the fact he's looking for it, and I think that's something, again, where I spoke about earlier, it comes with experience and time of scouting and coaching. Is I wouldn't have noticed that when I first started scouting. That would have been, he gave the ball away. Yeah. Whereas now I think I know what he tried there, and that was the right pass, and he just couldn't execute it properly. And I'm massive for that. I look for decision making all the time. So, you see some and they do something and it comes off and they score, and you say to yourself, he didn't mean that.
Yeah.
So that's the opposite. But again, I notice that now, and I know that, and I'll make a decision on that and say, I don't think that was a great decision. I think he just got away with it.
Yeah.
But I think your attitude and your decision making and things like that is, but the attitude of the way you turn up, get there on time. I think they're the things that really aggravate me from players. Is they get this opportunity at a trial or a club, and they get there late, and they walk in as if the club are waiting for them, or the people are waiting for them, rather than the other way around. And they don't apologise for being late. That side of it, I think your attitude, that can always be good.
You see Roy Keane has a big issue with a lot of things in the modern game, don't you? Where do you stand on, let's say if a player shows up and they look more like a pop star, is that something that's okay in modern scouting, or is it more like, do you instantly have an opinion?
It's funny because they'll stand out, won't they, from the beginning. So they will tend to get scouted, them guys, because as soon as you turn up to the game, you're going to go, oh, look at him. He looks the part. And I do it. You turn up to the game, I go, he looks like a footballer.
Yeah.
Like, what does that mean? What does that mean? But in my mind, I can, and I've done it before, and I've gone to a game and I'll say, them four there will be the best four players. And I haven't even seen them touch a ball yet.
Yeah.
And I can just see by what the equipment they've brought with them. They've got their studs, they've got their moulds, they've got their shin pads, they've got everything they need. They were there first on time with their whatever they needed to bring, their paperwork, whatever it is. They were there. They come and shake your hand, and they look the part, they act the part, they're professional, and that goes a long way. And they'll be like that for a reason, because they understand, what it takes. And, you'll find they work hard. And, so it does. I think that I've got a problem with how people look. If they look the pop star, if they can play and they're making good decisions and their attitude's right, then that'll be the decision that I make it on.
Yeah. And what sort of I've got about two more questions. I don't want to keep you too long, because otherwise we'll end up talking about football for hours. Good job there's no football on. We could have gone for a long time.
That's it. Yeah.
What part does confidence play?
Oh, massive! It's a massive confidence. I think I think that no matter what level you play at, no matter who you are, you're going to go through times where it's difficult, and you can't get your form, or you're playing badly, or the team's not performing. And if you're not confident in your own ability, or it's difficult. I think you have to be like that. We spoke briefly before as well about being at a club. When you go into a club, it's not an easy environment to walk into. You don't just go in and everyone goes, oh, great, you're the greatest player in the world, and it's all going to be easy. You have to have a little bit of arrogance about you, and fine line, isn't there? Arrogance and confidence.
Yeah,
it's fine line. And if you've got to be a bit arrogant. You have, and you've got to believe in yourself. I've got no problem with players who are arrogant as long as they back it up with doing what they've been asked to do and working hard. And I think that's a difficult thing for players that are arrogant, is just to control it and channel it in the right way.
So if there's just final question, if there's any lads watching this and they're interested in what you're saying, or parents maybe who have watched this and thought this is really interesting, I like what this guy's saying, how can people get in contact with you?
If they go on to www.ukfootballscouting.co.uk, and then once this is obviously at the moment we're all paused on, waiting to find out what we can do. But as soon as this all ends, we'll be back and doing trial. We cover all the UK, so we do events in London, Cardiff, Coventry, Manchester, and we've just gone to Southampton and Plymouth as well. Where we're going to do events down there as well. And it's just it's just a chance for players to come down. And what they've got to remember, the odds of getting scouted, I mean, everyone wants to be scouted. I get that. Everyone wants to be a footballer. The odds of that is tiny. So what they need to do is come down, meet us. I'm at all the trials, so if they got, I'll help, I'll answer questions. And I want it to be where we can educate them a little bit. And they'll come and they'll learn something and they'll go away a little bit more educated and they'll be a better player for it. The crazy thing is there will be players that do get scouted and do get a football club from it. Now, I spoke about George, the Spanish guy. He came to one of our trials on a Sunday and I had him training with a club where he is on Wednesday.
Wow.
And that was just seeing him for that one game because I knew that, he had something, something that we wanted someone else to have a look at and to test him in more. But it's different for each player. So some players I might say, I really like it. I want to see him again. So as much as they want to hear, the player and the parents want to hear, this club may not have interested in him or whatever, that's a positive. Because this kid might never have been heard of before. And all of a sudden, now he wants to be watched again. And, sometimes it takes me a year to place a player, 2 years. Other players, it takes 3 days. So it's just a lot of luck involved as well. I see a player, I might see a winger one day, and it just happened that a club had spoke to me the week before looking for a winger. That's luck.
Yeah.
That's being in the right place at the right time, and that all comes into it as well. It's not as straightforward as this. I turn up, I'll show how good I am, and then I get a club. It's not. I wish it was. It'd make everything a lot easier. Wouldn't it? So it's just about the more people say to me, "What about other trial companies? What about?" I always say, just go on them. You never know who will be watching, and as much as hopefully I know what I'm doing, is I still am limited to. I might not have a club that I'm working with that want a player in that position, and someone else might. So get yourself fit. Be prepared to work hard and then put yourselves in the right places, because the saying you've got to be in the right place at the right time, you still got to do the right things when you're there.
2 quick fire questions. Who's your perfect player ever?
Paul Gascoigne's massive for me, but he weren't complete, obviously. So, he's probably gone against everything I've said you should be as a footballer, but with a hard work. I think Luka Modric probably.
Yeah.
When Luka Modric played at Tottenham, he was always in space. Somehow he managed, the pitch could look tight and the ball would come near him, and all of a sudden he had 2, 3, 4, 5 yards around him where he just turned his body and just opened up the other way and left 2 or 3 players just standing still. Amazing players. No accident. He went on and played for Real Madrid after he was at Tottenham. And the crazy thing is, when he comes to Tottenham, he was playing left wing.
Yeah.
Harry Redknapp, I think Harry Redknapp signed him. Sure did he? He was playing left midfield, sort of a left attacking midfield role, and then played him in the middle. And I remember the time that all the Spurs fans were saying he's too small to play in there. No, I think you've done right.
The second one, who's the best player that's never made it?
The best player's never made it.
That you know?
I know.
I was waiting for you to say yourself.
I was thinking it.
I would have. I would have said it.
Yeah. I don't know. That's a tough one, because I'm a little bit negative. I always say to people I come across very negative.
Yeah.
But it's because I'm realistic.
It's because you're a Tottenham fan.
I'm very much that. Yeah, it could be that. Yeah. But I just always look at it and say, I always think there's a reason you never made it. And there are guys I know who are fantastic players, and people say, how is he never a footballer? It's because he used to drink.
Yeah.
Drink, or because he don't work hard. There's always a reason. No one got left, really. I don't think. There's no one
really?
I know that I think I can't think of a reason why he didn't make it.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I think there's always something that happened, whether that's yourself or a situation, something happened. There's a reason why he didn't make it. I don't think anyone just got not seen.
Yeah. I think that's a good note to end on. All right then, John, thank you so much for your time. I hope that this helps a few young lads, maybe some parents. I mean, we've answered a whole range of questions there, so I hope it's, going to benefit a load of people and give a better insight to maybe players who are still trying to make it on what they need, and players maybe some sense of reassurance or calmness to the players, that, let's say, closure to those who didn't make it, who are maybe looking back and saying, what was the problem? They might listen to this and hear what you're saying and think, okay, with an older mindset, I can see now what went wrong. So yeah, really appreciate you coming on.
Once you get older, you do that, don't
Yeah.
you? You sort of, when, like I said, when I played, and there was a guy, Tommy Penault. I don't know if you've heard of Tommy Penault, but he was at Colchester at the same time as me. And at the time, I wanted to play in centre midfield. And when I look back, like this guy brought up in France, and he went on and played league football, and he was a good player. Yeah. And he was better than me by miles. Do you know what I mean? So yeah. I think when you look back, you realise. I'm sure there'll be people who say I'm wrong, and they know people who should have made it, because football's about opinion, isn't it? And that's what I always say to players as well. So these players that might see this, that have been told they're not good enough, I might have told them they're not good enough. Don't believe it. It's only that one person's opinion or that one club's opinion, and we get things wrong. We're just doing it on what we saw. I might have only saw that player for 1 hour, 2 hours. When you work with that player every day, day in, day out, you get to know them better. And, never take that no as a, I'm not saying no, you're not going to play professional football. I'm saying at this time, I wouldn't put you into a professional football club. Go away, work hard, prove me wrong, and prove other scouts and clubs wrong.
Nice little bit of motivation to end on as well. Okay then, John. Thank you so much for your time, mate. I really appreciate it. I really do, and hopefully we can get together and do a couple of documentaries and push this kind of football format a bit further and see what we can do for a lot of younger players out there. But thank you, mate. Really appreciate it.
No, thanks, Chris. Thanks for having me, mate.
Speak to you soon.